I was saying earlier today that I'm really envious of Jefferson County because to have the opportunity for a 20-year investment is almost unheard of. We fight for one-year grants, and we just heard about a one-year grant in Hinesville and how they need to have that renewed to keep the work going. We fight for 3-year grants, and we think, oh boy, you know, that's really going to give us a little elbow room to work. And if you can get a 5-year grant, oh my goodness, you think you really got something going if you can get a 5-year grant. But to have the opportunity for a steady income, maybe not always the same amount because it's going to be tied to something else, but to know that Jefferson County has an opportunity to build a program to deal with the issues of this county over a 20-year period is something that you should be proud of. Because I can tell you that I don't know of another community that wouldn't be envious that they're not here instead of you. So I want to quickly go through something that I think might add some understanding to the task that you have. This morning you heard about a lot of opportunities that communities have had and how they have capitalized on those opportunities and how individuals have profited from those opportunities. And I said, you know, that is great. And it sets up perfectly what I need to say to you this afternoon. You're talking about building a community where families who strive are families who thrive. That's on your program. And I think that sums it up in terms of what the big picture is and what the big challenge is. Building a community. A community. Not to say that you don't have a community already, but to make sure that all of the parts of this community are in unison and working together around a single goal, being funded and empowered by the generosity of this foundation. And if you do that, then the families are going to thrive. There'd be no question about it. And as the superintendent so ably said, that if you break that cycle, then you don't have to worry about it. Because if you can get families accustomed to their children going to college, then those children who go to college will expect their children to go to college, and you'll have a much better community. Not that everybody needs to go to college to be successful, but all of the data is now saying that if you do not get something beyond high school, that you're going to be economically handicapped. So every child in Jefferson County has to finish high school and then get some additional training and education beyond that to be successful in the 21st century. So I want to speak to the role of leadership in bringing about these approaches to strengthening families and communities, and the implication of this leadership galvanizing resources and strengthening the community network. Because I already know you've got a Family Connections here, which is supposed to be coordinating and bringing together the various agencies and resources. I want to put it in a big context because most people don't put what we have to do in the larger context. The community is made up of social institutions, each having a role to play in the health and welfare of that institution. We have government, which everybody knows the role of government. We have religious institutions, we have schools, we have a social welfare structure, we've got families, and we've got an economy. This is like a chain. And when all of the links in the chain are strong, the chain is strong. But when there are weak links in the chain, it weakens the entire chain. So when families aren't able to do what they're expected to do, when the social welfare system doesn't assist those families when they need help, when the schools aren't fully educating and providing the necessary preparation for people to enter life and to the economy, when the religious institutions aren't helping and setting a moral agenda for the community and doing other things that they're supposed to do, and when the economy is not functioning to give people economic opportunity, it impacts all of the rest of it. So as one goes, all of it goes. And that's why the idea of you putting this committee together to determine what 2 or 3 goals you're going to work on is so important. And it should involve representatives from all of these various institutions. The equation that I like to use, and the superintendent did it, and the more she talked, the more nervous I became because I thought she was going to give my speech. But the equation for personal, family, and community economic stability begins with education. If you do not have an education in the 21st century, and if your children aren't learning at high levels, then your community is not going to thrive in the future. As a matter of fact, it's going to have problems in the present. You tie that then to work. Why do people go to school? Well, some of us are just bookworms and we like going to school. And, that has some intrinsic value to it. But most people go to school to learn some skills and some knowledge so they can go to work and make some money. Anybody who went to school who didn't want to end up making some money or having a job? I don't think so. Very few can do that. So you have to have education, and at the end it has to be rewarded with work. And I don't mean just labor, but putting forth an effort to work towards some kind of outcome and to produce something valuable. That has to be tied to earnings. Most people in poverty work every day. 64% of the people who are in poverty in Savannah, Georgia, and I talk about what I know, work every day. But they earn less than what they need to support themselves and a family. When you think of $7.25 an hour, and this young lady who's going to be going to work as a nurse, she was making $3 and praying for tips. Most people in poverty are working every day, but they aren't earning enough. So work has to be the kind of thing that pays enough for people to live on. So as you develop your businesses and as you look to reach out for new industries to come into Jefferson County, please, any job is better than no job. But if you're going to go out and recruit, try to recruit jobs that pay what we call a living wage, enough for people to support themselves off and not be the working poor all of the time. The next thing is, if you earn enough, you can save. But if everything you're earning has to go to support yourself and your family, you don't have the ability to save, because unless you get some support from an IDA program or something like that, everything is meeting your basic needs. And so it's hard to build assets if you're not earning something worthwhile. And if you have these things together, then you have the magic word that the superintendent talked about. This is the equation for opportunity. If these things aren't present and sufficient, then you don't have the opportunity to excel and to support your family and to have hopes and dreams that are realizable. So what strengthens families? We just said education, access to economic opportunity, social and community supports, and private and public policies that facilitate the above. So as you put this initiative together, and I gave Alan the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm sure he'll be willing to share it with you. But as you begin to think about this initiative and what you need to build the infrastructure, you have to have an infrastructure. You just can't have a whole lot of wishes and hopes and dreams. You got to build an organizational structure that can make that stuff happen. And that's a challenge that I think you're already taking. But I just want to be a provocateur and an advocate for structure. Structure that can then give you the mechanism to move forward to realize your dreams and hopes. So what you want to do then is build strong families that produce successful youth. And then in order to do that, you've got to have, Alan told me not to do that too. So what can I, oh yeah, there we go. Yeah. So you got to have stronger schools. You got to have increased parent participation. You've got to have increased economic opportunity. You got to have increased income and supports, social supports, and you've got to have an effective youth development program. And I'm not saying that you don't have strong schools, but you can always be better. I believe in the principle of continuous improvement. And so if you say your schools are perfect, they may be perfect, but they can be more perfect. So I'm not here, for y'all to run me out of town talking about your school. But I'm saying that whatever you have that you think is working, it can work better. So if you embrace the concept of continuous improvement as you get ready for this 20-year journey, think about how you can improve everything that you have now to make it better. It's got to be better if your poverty rate is what your poverty rate is, or something ain't going right. Now, this whole process is going to be under an umbrella called community development. I don't know if you've talked about this or not, but this is what it's going to be. It's going to be developing those institutions that make up your community. And you're going to create these new networks, and you're going to develop group and individual skills to improve the social and economic environmental conditions of the community. And you're going to set some identifiable activities pursued by the community in order to increase your human, social, political, and economic capacity. That's the beauty of this, to have the opportunity to do this. Other communities would fight you to have a 20-year commitment. First of all, if you aren't dissatisfied with the status quo, just tell the folk go someplace else, because you won't be motivated to do anything. And if they choose you and you still don't want to participate, then they just made a bad choice. That's as simple as it is. You gotta have some dissatisfaction with the present quo, and you have to say things could be better. If you don't start there, just let us go on someplace else. And I know that that's not going to happen. You have to believe and expect that self-help is going to be what is going to make this happen. You're going to have to want to help yourself. Jefferson County must want to help itself. The individuals in Jefferson County must want to help themselves. And the leadership of Jefferson County must want to help themselves to make the county better, and therefore the residents of the county better. So that's where the local leadership comes in. If the local leadership isn't committed to it, it's going to be very difficult to happen. And so I believe that from what I've heard since I've been here this morning, that the local leadership is committed because they see that vision of a better Jefferson County, and they're willing to share the leadership. Not just the haves, but the haves and the halfway haves and the have-nots, all working together and respecting each other to make this happen. And then the tough part is the collaboration. To bring together people who've never worked before, some who will like each other, some who don't like one another, some who understand one another and some who don't understand one another, all working on behalf of Jefferson County to make this a better place for you. You live here. Your children are growing up here. Your grandparents are here and growing older and need help. And so, in the spirit of collaboration, with good shared leadership, you can have the success that you want. The other thing that you have to be willing to do is to experiment. I've heard a lot of proven practices today. I've heard a lot of good practices, but you gotta, the old cliche about thinking out of the box. What works in Savannah, what works in Atlanta or Augusta may not work in Jefferson County. And so we can tell you what worked for us, but you've got to figure out what's going to work for Jefferson County. And I like to refer to myself as a synthesizer. I do a lot of reading, and I visit a lot of places, and I go to a lot of conferences, and I'm always listening and trying to hear new things that I can take back to Savannah and put together with what we already have and make something different that's unique to us. And that's what you're going to have to do when you decide what you're going to do to improve outcomes for the residents of Jefferson County. You may have to, create a unique IDA program. But it's in your hands. So the other thing is cultivating allies, and that's when I was talking about those unlikely partners. People who may not share your political philosophy may be the very ones you need to help you do something. And if the goal overcomes the ideology, then you can get the work done. But if you're going to get into ideology and all kinds of things that divide us rather than bring us together, then you're not going to be able to move, because then you get into arguments. And these are round-robin arguments where, you've got 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. You got a little truth on this side and a little truth on that side. And everybody believes that their way is the best way. But you got to get past that, because it's going to happen, folks. How many of you are members of a church? Raise your hand. A synagogue, a mosque. Y'all know what happens in the church. And I won't say much more, because y'all know what happens in the church. Hard work. This is going to be hard work. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and have Jefferson County transformed. It's not going to happen. But you have a better than average chance because of the long-term commitment of the foundation. You got to focus on specific actions without losing sight of the weird and wonderful. Right now, if you do this right, you do not know what Jefferson County is going to be like in 10, 15, or 20 years. You can have your vision, and you need to start out working on a vision for where you think you want to go. But I often tell folks, that journey is like a roadmap. When I pulled up Louisville on the GPS and looked at it, it went straight, I-16 to US 1. But as I was driving from Savannah here, there are curves and all kinds of things, and that map it will make you think it's going to be easy. But it's not easy, and it's not always as expected, because sometimes you even have to have a detour in that journey. But you're on the journey, and it's not going to be all the way as you expected. Now to close, this is one of my favorites, because a lot of times we get egocentric and we think that we're doing something, and that can really get in the way. But good leadership will say this: go to the people, live among them, learn from them, start from what they know, build on what they have, build the best leaders. When their task is accomplished and the work is done, the people all will remark, we have done it ourselves. That's what good leadership does. It doesn't need the credit, because everybody knows who's working and who's not working. And when you got to get up and testify and, do all those kind of things about I, and me, turn the me upside down and create a W out of the M, and you'll get a lot more done. So that's my message to you. I hope to be able to follow this from afar, because I think it is, as I said, an exceptional opportunity for a community to have a long-term financial commitment to help rebuild itself or transform itself into almost anything it wants to be. So I thank you for inviting me, and as I always say when I'm out of town, if I said something that you don't like, just let me get to my car and get on back to Chapel County. Thank you all very much.